Welcome to another episode of Tech Unhinged, where technology meets human. I'm your host, Rabia Javeed, and today we are joined by Jason Kaufman, a solutions architect at Telarus with deep expertise in cybersecurity and cloud solutions. Jason has a track record of helping businesses navigate complex technological challenges and defend against evolving digital threats. He brings a wealth of experience to our conversation. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Jason, we'll start off a bit candid. So, you've had a quite interesting career journey. What initially sparked your interest in cybersecurity, and how did you get into this field?
Yeah. So yeah, I started in the communication space, as you saw from my bio, designing contact centers and unified communications deployment, anything that had a voice piece of it. But then also there was a networking component because we got into SD-WAN, firewalling. There was an on-site PBX that had to be on the edge of the network. So I was dealing with a lot of CCIEs and telling them that, hey, I had a device that's sitting in front of yours, which you can imagine from somebody that owns the network, that's like a big no-no. So, you have to get in a lot of these network design conversations. So we're getting into network security, and then kind of morphed into running the operations of a desktop as a service organization, running, Citrix VDI based in Azure, which got into more of the cybersecurity on protecting risk and the identity platforms and all that stuff. So I had a decent background for holistically when you look between the 8 domains of the CISSP exam, things that fall under cybersecurity. So I already had like a background there, and I really like solving puzzles. And being in the new role at Telarus, we consult with many different customers from, small mom and pop shops to Fortune 50 companies, and they all have specific needs and saw the same trend across many of them, which is, cybersecurity was their biggest fear. And that was the biggest problem that they were looking to solve. So inherently, my natural problem solving, ways, I determined, hey, this is something I want to get more into. And since I already had kind of the background that spread across a lot of the things, I just wanted to expand into that. And that's what led me into getting my CISSP, CISM, and CCSP. So I can actually, have further in-depth conversations and help those people, have that peace of mind on, hey, let's protect you. Let's mitigate a lot of these threats. Let's get you to know about them for one, and, go from there. So long answer on why cybersecurity. It's just that everlasting puzzle that keeps changing consistently. And I know we're going to talk about AI here and how that affects that shortly. So it's always exciting. It's always something new. It's always something that somebody needs, but it's ultimately helping people tremendously because it's the one thing on, hey, cybersecurity, if you don't protect yourself, I've actually seen it with companies here in my little town of Venice, Florida. You could actually go out of business if you don't protect your stuff because you can get locked out of your data. Your data can get leaked. There's many different threats out there, but I like to try to help people from having that happen to them.
Pretty impressive, Jason. Moving to our next question, you see that AI is transforming cybersecurity at an incredible pace. From your perspective, what are the biggest shifts that you've seen? How AI is both attacking and defending these systems today?
Yeah, a lot of it is around the speed at which AI works. The human can't keep up with how fast the machine can go. So from a threat perspective, think about, hey, now you have the people that are enabled to go, breach or hack a network from externally to where they can type in a human response and say, hey, go try to hack this network. And then this system that was trained on every single piece of what a breach, to get to a breach happens, they're going to check out vulnerabilities through the CVEs. They're going to check out all this different information, going to do reconnaissance of this company on this person's behalf, which usually is a pretty time sensitive and time inclusive thing. That's going to do all of this instantaneously, and then it's going to go try to breach this network automatically without this person actually lifting a finger. So it's finding all these vulnerabilities. It's proving escalation. It's breaching these networks, and then it gives a report on, hey, this is what we found. This is how you can use this in the future sense, whether it's selling it to somebody else as a third party or you're using it to further escalate and get information from this company. But it's effectively autonomously doing all this stuff on behalf of a person. So now you don't have to be that advanced persistent threat, that hacker that has all this knowledge on networking and command line stuff. You don't have to have all that experience. Now you just need to use human language and tell the system to physically do it. Another thing as well is phishing. So now, before when you get like a phishing email, there would be some markers of it that were easily discern out, like, hey, this doesn't make sense grammatically, or this is something completely, generic that makes no sense to me. Now they're actually using these tools to go find information specifically pertaining to the person on social media or anything that they posted to make it sound like them. Or if they're trying to, trying to act like they're somebody else, they're going to find how that person speaks, and they're writing those emails and those text messages exactly pertaining to that use case. And they're doing this all very easily because they could tell these systems, hey, go find out top 400 people from this company, make me an email for each one of them, and then spit it out automatically and send this automatically on my behalf. So phishing is massive right now because it's much harder to detect what's a phishing email and what isn't. So the threats are evolving tremendously, and it's, everybody knows from the cybersecurity space, it's easier to hack a human than it is a network because all the the common term of human error, it's much easier to do it that way. From the defense side, is allowing us to react much quicker to when an alert or an anomaly comes in, to where you're having those automated playbooks. Generally when you heard the term like SOAR or something like that, something that's like automation, orchestration, all that stuff. Now that's adapting to where it has another machine learning perspective behind it, to where it's recognizing more and more things rather than just a specific playbook to a specific alert and an anomaly. Now it's using a lot of like human thinking and reasoning to figure out, hey, this is the way that we should, mitigate and remediate this threat. And then the other part is enablement. Seeing a lot of requests for this, to where if you've heard of like Microsoft's Copilot for Sentinel, stuff like that, to where now it has a large language model built into the SIM tool, to where an alert anomaly comes in. It does that playbook automation to where it automatically remediates or contains the threat. If it can, it gives you a spit out on, hey, we've tracked it based on correlation, all these alerts back to here. Here's the steps that we've already performed. Here's your next 5 steps that you should try. So what that does, it enables that new employee that, fresh out of college or not as experienced as somebody that's like a 7 to 10 year, SOC analyst. It allows them to be hyper effective at their job. And, it allows for, quicker training, quicker in the game there. So there's a lot of things that AI is changing from the threat to the defense side.
What's more alarming is that it's so difficult to now differentiate between how a human talks and then how AI talks, because, I probably talk the same way and AI is doing the same. So who's me and who's not me, right? And one time I did this thing where I wrote something myself and I asked AI if it's AI plagiarized. And it was like, yeah, it is written by me. And then I was like, no, it's written by me.
Like my wife's also in in nursing school still. So one thing she has to do whenever she turns in a report or an essay or something like that is it takes it through Turn It In. And the first thing it does is checks it for AI. And she's like, I've written this entirely without using any AI, but it still gives a 90% feedback score on 90% chance this was written by AI. So, I mean, really the question is, how effective is this at knowing who is it written by, machine or a human?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Coming to my next question, Jason, there have been alarming statistics that in 2025, a significant 70% of companies are likely to be targeted by cyber threats. How do you think businesses are preparing for this increasingly dangerous landscape?
So unfortunately, I think most of them are not. From a lot of the conversations that we're having, a lot of them are. I don't want to say like they're accepting the risk, because then they know, hey, this is what our exposure is. We know how much this could potentially cost us from impact. But we're accepting that, and we're willing to make this payout. We're willing to deal with the consequences. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of people ignore it. There is still an increase on people that are accepting that, hey, we are a potential target, even though we're small in size. We don't have, our data isn't super important, but they do have data of companies that are larger. And the assumption is from a threat actor is, these larger companies are paying all this money for defense. Governments, enterprises in the Fortune 1000 space, like they all have funding and budgets in order to do all this defense in depth. So they have advanced firewall techniques, they have endpoint techniques, they're monitoring all this 24/7, whether it's internally through a SOC or an MDR provider or something like that. But these smaller companies generally don't have the budget for that. They're generally running lean and mean when it comes to profitability, and they may have 8 to 10 users, maybe even smaller, but they still have third-party access to these larger companies' data because they're using their applications, they're sharing data somehow through an API call or something like that. So we're seeing even though it is an increase on how many people are recognizing that they still are a target, it's still not as many that we want to see. And we're trying to tell that story on, hey, there's some things you could do that are very cost effective that severely limit the risk that you have. But I think in 2025 we're going to see either companies start investing in that. We're seeing that uptick now. They're starting to invest. They're starting to hear the stories. They're starting to see their friends' companies that actually get breached. What happens to them? Three generations of accounting firms that are going out of business because they got breached and they couldn't get their data back. Stuff like that. We're starting to see people dip their toes into just even doing like a backup disaster recovery scenario, dipping their toes in cybersecurity maturity without doing the frameworks, the gap analysis, all that stuff. So long answer to your question, I think we're seeing an improvement there, but we're also going to see people still. That I don't think there's going to be any decreasing in the news of saying, hey, this company got breached. They got breached through this, whether it's an IoT device or it's a third party of a smaller company that didn't protect the data like they should. I think we're going to continue to see that, and ransomware is still going to be a problem just because it's so easy to be a threat actor on like ransomware as a service and that type of stuff where you don't need to have all that inherent intelligence and experience breaching systems. You could do it on the piggybacking of somebody else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When you talk about that, a lot of companies are still not accepting the cyber threat. By that, do you mean that they've still not put themselves at the advent of the AI? Or, is it something that they just want to ignore?
And I think it's more the latter. They're ignoring it because they see it as just another expense. Just something, a line item that came up out of nowhere. They didn't prepare for it, and they don't assume that they're a target because they're so whatever they want to classify themselves small. Their data is not important. That whatever their reasoning is, they're just ignoring the fact that there is a threat out there, and they're not understanding the fact on how AI and machine learning is allowing these threats to expand so much that the threat landscape now is massive to where these threat actors don't really care how large a company is. They're going out and searching for vulnerabilities anywhere out in the internet, and they get in those systems. The average dwell time still is around 200 days, to where they're just sitting there learning how much final impact is this data that I'm holding hostage right here, or can hold hostage. How much can I ask for in Bitcoin or whatever to this company in order to get this back? So they don't really care what it is. They're going out and finding out, and then they're figuring out, hey, we can charge this much because this is what this data is worth to them, the size of the company. So yeah.
Yeah, I think once they fall down into that puddle, only then they realize that, what security measures that they should have taken in the first place. Jason, I've seen that you've been very vocal about shadow AI and about the risks of unsanctioned AI tools. From your perspective, how serious is this challenge?
It's very serious. I mean, marketecture and news is pushing all this stuff like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Anthropic, Perplexity. There's many different foundational models out there that it's easy to go find on a search on any search engine. So once people get the word of this, like, hey, I can make my life a lot easier by putting an input and it does this whole printout for me, or I can put in this data, whatever that input is, putting in data to get something back that helps me out tremendously. People are inherently going to do this just from just human interest and making themselves more efficient and doing their job on their behalf. So the one thing that we're seeing from a shadow AI is people are signing up and using these tools, and the problem is they don't understand the impact of putting company data in these tools to get a printout that's much more effective to them. Doing something generic and just saying, hey, go search for this for public internet, find me a printout on what you're finding here. That stuff is relatively insignificant to the company from a risk perspective. But when you start taking data of that company, hey, generate me a financial report based on these metrics of our findings that we had over the previous 4 or 5 quarters, and give me a trajectory of where we're going to be in the next 2 years that I can present to our board. And the system will do that because it recognizes, hey, I have data being inputted in me. I have an objective that I need to give this type of export, and then do that printout. But what that user doesn't know is every time you put data into that LLM, that large language model, it is using it to train further responses. So let's say you're in the accounting team of a company or an HR team, and you're putting in information that's confidential, and you're getting that printout that you're like, hey, this is great. This does everything I want it to. Now a threat actor can go in and ask for information based on your company if they're maybe doing some reconnaissance on it, and now it's being spit out with that information that it was trained on, which was confidential information. So now that threat actor has internal information that they can use to either go phish, or they can, find out if you're using specific applications. Heck, we've even seen people put inputs to where they're using like usernames and stuff like that, to where now the threat actor knows, hey, this is what a username looks like for this company. Now I have much more information to go on. I can try to, do like a password spray or a brute force or something like that to this specific application with these usernames. So there's a lot of shadow AI and the negative impact of people using these tools without knowing, how much risk they're inherently using on the internet, or how much risk they're using to the company by using these tools.
So I mean, it's like every AI model that's operating this particular way.
Yeah, because they're continuously learning, and the deep learning model is continuous on learning from the inputs that it gets and the outputs, and then they also have the human in the loop feedback, to where you can do like the thumbs up and the thumbs down, like, hey, this is a good response. So it uses that reward system to train itself to say, hey, this is a good response. Now it's not really smart enough to say, hey, the response and the way it was delivered was very good, but it also takes it holistically on the data that was presented was correct. So in order to mitigate hallucinations, which is incorrect responses from the large language model, they use the human to tell, hey, this is good or this is not good. They're starting to build it out to where the reasoning models and stuff like that can determine it themselves. But having that human say, yes, this is a great response, further trains that large language model, and hey, this is good content, this is correct. I need to use this in future responses as well. So that's where the answer is yes. Any input to these large language models trains it for further responses, and that's the inherent problem with their solutions. That's why people are trying to enable their employees so quickly on something that they can govern and control on which data would leave the system, but then also train their employees on what an input should look like. Hey, don't put this type of data in there. Also, here's something that we're giving you to where we can control what data is staying internal, and then which data can potentially go outside the company. But it performs that data loss prevention, data leakage prevention, that type of stuff on the input, because now that's more important than just making somebody more efficient. So I've seen a lot of CIOs and CISOs, in order to get around shadow AI and get in front of it, they enable their teams with something to give access to use the tools, but then they can control everything about it because it's within their own tenant and their own environment.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of answered my next question as well, which was about given the shadow AI, AI-driven phishing attacks and deepfakes and all of the threats that they're having, how can companies detect and sort of defend against these evolving threats?
There's a lot of tools that inherently, are looking to protect this type of stuff and recognize there's something look malicious. So you have like email security tools that not only are detecting from malicious domains or domain lookalikes, they're looking for the anomalies there. They're looking for something that sounds like they're even looking at training themselves on how a normal employee sends an email, and then how the interaction happens on day to day within some digital channel, and then seeing if something looks outside of that and reacting to it. So there are tools that will recognize certain behaviors of an AI tool. But ultimately, a lot of it comes down to a mature cybersecurity maturity policy and frameworks and all that stuff. And most importantly, training employees on what to look for. If something comes in from your CEO, CFO, or something like that, that is something that out of the ordinary that they wouldn't normally request, or it goes to a different ACH account that you're not really used to in the system, pick up the phone and call that person. Or if you're in the office, go talk to that person physically. Use a different communication path rather than what it came in. Just to validate that this is legitimate. I had a recent conversation with an 8-person construction team that they had 6 incidents within 3 months, to where the accounting executive got an email from the owner of the company that said, hey, send this much money here. And they did it 6 times without recognizing, hey, this doesn't, before talking to that person and saying, hey, I sent that money on your behalf. And the person was like, whoa, what are you talking about? It totaled over $500,000.
Oh,
over the six different times. So like we're talking like stuff that's not malicious intent. I mean, you do have somebody that's sending a malicious email that's deepfake and being somebody that's not the physical person that should be sending that. But the person that's actually sending the money out of the company is not a malicious actor. It's just somebody that's not aware to detect, hey, this seems out of the ordinary. Let me go verify this. Verification is, it's going to add a little bit of time and stuff. It's going to negatively affect a little bit of your efficiency, but it's also going to protect you inherently to where you could have potentially mitigated and prevented $500,000 being sent out from your company if you just asked and validated, hey, is this a legitimate, request? Same thing happens with Zoom meetings like this and voice calls. Voice biometric detection now is starting to get rampant in the financial industry. So detecting if something sounds like it's using a voice control or an accident mitigation technique or something like that, systems can inherently detect that out and also validate that the person is who they say they are before it even gets to a human. And then you have, what and all that stuff you need to validate as well. So there are inherent tools that are helping out a lot of this deepfake stuff today. And it's a combination of continuous innovation on the threat actor side and the continuous innovation on how do we defend against it. But ultimately, the best path is continuous training to employees to know what to look for, and then the defense in depth on policies, procedures, and then a lot of the technical controls of everything to protect them as well.
Yeah, no, this made a lot of sense. This incident was very familiar in one of my previous companies. We had the same thing, where we were receiving emails directly from the CEO asking for money to be sent to a particular account.
Been really good on like even domain spoofing to where if there's an O or something in the name of the company and part of the domain, they'll put like a zero there or throw a random S at the end of it to make it look like it's a plural name. And they react so quick on once they develop this domain and purchase it, the sending the emails and stuff before any domain lookalike tools or anything like that can find it or any services, to where it's making it really hard to watch because it has the exact same email address besides one letter or one number off or something like that, sending an email to you directed to you because they did the reconnaissance on your social media and this person's social media to see what a normal email would look like from them and kind of see what the friendship would look like. So they can custom tailor a lot of this stuff. I mean, heck, if you can get $500,000 off of 6 emails to somebody, that's really good ROI.
Yeah, no, that is. So, Jason, while AI is being weaponized for cyber attacks, like, on a great scale, it's also strengthening our defenses. What do you think are some of the most promising AI-driven security innovations right now?
A lot of it is detecting AI tools themselves. So, when we're talking about the shadow AI, the first part of any framework in cybersecurity is knowing what you have to deal with. So they always come in like inspect or some other synonym of that type of word to where it's effectively document and know what you have. Unfortunately, shadow AI it's tough to figure out what employees are using because you don't have any insight into that besides word of mouth. So like I've seen a couple different surveys done online, and it was at least 40 to 60% of people use AI and don't tell their IT teams or cybersecurity teams about it at their company. So now there's tools to recognize these different URLs and these different applications to say, hey, we recognize this as ChatGPT. We recognize this as Google Gemini. This device that is tied to this user is physically using it. And now they're starting to break open into those packets that are being sent to these tools and seeing actually what the inputs are. So you can see how I don't want to say the word malicious, but how unknowingly adding risk to a company this employee is physically using these tools for. And so yeah, getting visibility into a lot of that is a big one now that we're seeing. Another one is the rapid response that we were talking about earlier. As soon as an anomaly comes into either the SIM tool or whoever's watching that stuff 24/7 or whatever tools there, could be the EDR tool or what are you using, CrowdStrike, Defender, all that stuff. Having that automated playbook that kicks in and is kind of dynamic depending on what the alert or the anomaly is. Seeing a lot of that to where those playbooks are expanding a lot to where you don't have to specifically define it. It's reacting based on this, we can go look at, hey, what's the CVE, what's the MITRE ATT&CK framework, what's all these different reactionary things that need to happen, and it will do that on the person's behalf, and then it enables the team what to do next. So we're seeing a lot of that enablement of the SOC teams through automation and generative AI, plus the detection of a lot of these tools.
How can organizations strike the right balance between automation and human expertise in cybersecurity?
I mean, it is a great question. I mean, I feel like everybody's assuming automation is going to take over everything. Because now we're seeing products out there for like AI SOC. You don't really need to have a SOC team. This will do it on your behalf. But inherently, machine is only as good as the information that it's trained for. So there consistently still needs to be a human in the loop somewhere. So even though I think we're going to see further automation on the lower hanging fruit, the immediate reaction, the containment, and remediation of known playbooks type stuff and development of those playbooks, but I still think we're going to need the escalation to the human component to where SOC analysts, you're going to have the different tiers still to where the newer SOC analysts can help with the automation stuff and helping build a playbook, help align and train the systems to know, hey, this is what we should do, this is the next steps, and this was done correctly. And then you have those, veteran SOC analysts that can come in and do the stuff that the automation can't do. So I think we're still going to need that higher level expertise, that human component there, to where now we're going to see the further hybrid approach to where autonomous is going to take it further and further down the stack, but we still need those human individuals that are hyper competent in order to come in over the top. So I think just like everything else with AI is going to augment and it's going to help, but I think it's also going to force humans to become more strategic.
So our cybersecurity resources are not going anywhere pretty soon.
No, definitely not. And if you hear a company tell you otherwise, I would be definitely I'd be hesitant to put all my eggs in that one basket.
Jason, compliance and regulations are still catching up with AI advancements, and it can be pretty tricky. What legal or ethical concerns should businesses keep in mind?
A lot of it found like any type of framework that comes out generally follows the NIST framework, and they're mimicking everything from a privacy perspective of stuff like GDPR. So one thing you want to follow is make sure that you know where the data is located and how the data is interacting with these tools, and protect the data from leaving the company, and also looking at sensitivity labeling and all of that stuff. So as long as most companies that have a mature cybersecurity practice are already doing that when it comes to emails. They're already doing it with any type of communication that's going external, where somebody can attach a document or attach information or something like that. They're already applying these types of tool sets to this. It doesn't change with AI. Ultimately, AI expands that threat because it's so much faster moving, that you also want to apply those techniques here. So you want to ensure that you're following all privacy policies, whether you're looking at specific state ones. You got CCPA California, you got New York, you got pretty much every state's going to come out their own standard, but a lot of them have a lot of the same same components to them and same controls. And if you follow GDPR, generally you're going to be most of the way there. So you want to follow all the stuff that's known out there, so you're ready for whenever that compliance comes in or that framework requirement comes in. A lot of it's pretty much the same as what we've seen before. It's just expanding, adding the AI as a piece of it. Things specifically you want to watch out for. And then if you have your own AI application, there's a lot that needs to go there too. Like generally protecting any type of network or application tooling, you want to do that as well. But most of the time, people are using other people's tools to where they just got to protect the data and the user access to it. And
given that you talked about how companies are sort of at the verge of all of these threats, I've seen this shift in companies with making their own internalized AI models, for their employees, where they can sort of ask all the information or get all the information related to the companies. I think this is also one of the good ways of sort of keeping it central to themselves rather than just putting it out there.
100% agree. And I mean, you've seen all these breaches. Talking about medical, 23andMe is massively in the news right now because of their breach that they had. Now they're filing for bankruptcy and all that stuff. So you can see a lot of the impact that happens when a breach occurs. Especially if you're holding important information like that. And a lot of people are trying to triangulate healthcare information to see like, hey, is this person at a risk for cancer or heart disease and all that stuff based on past history? Or there's a lot of different tools that I'm starting to work with companies on that are trying to develop this stuff. And they want to go to market strategy, and they're trying to do all this securely, but inherently they all have the same fear. How do I protect this data to make sure that we don't have that indirect cost of loss of trust within the marketplace once we start releasing this capability? So we're seeing a lot there to where people are recognizing, especially application developers and the people that are pulling in all this data. They're starting to recognize, how important it is to control privacy, control the data management, and all that stuff. But one thing we're also seeing with companies is they're either coming in asking for like if they're in the Microsoft stack, they're asking obviously for Copilot. How do we enable Copilot and Azure OpenAI within our own tenant and applying all the different necessary controls? Because everybody knows RBAC within Active Directory or Enter ID is not going to protect them the way that they think, because OpenAI is implemented at the tenant level. So now you need to use data classification with, Purview or something like that to make sure you're attaching sensitivity labeling. You have to get really granular to make sure that you're not crossing organizations as well to where, you're still following the path of least privilege to where somebody in accounting is not getting HR data, or, a salesperson isn't getting information of the CEO and stuff like that. So you're protecting the company from itself there. But then we're also seeing companies like, hey, we already have some users using Gemini, so they're used to using Google's AI tooling. How do we effectively enable it to where we don't have the investment yet to get to privatize that type of stuff? How do we put in like an application gateway in front of it to where we can protect our users from themselves while also keeping the same tooling that they're used to in place? So we're seeing that type of application enablement to where it comes in over the top of those foundational models. That stuff is super easy. Like there's SaaS-based stuff that's ready to go for that. So we're, the idea of where we play is to give them options on different ways to enable their employees for this to protect themselves. And those are probably the two main ways I've seen people request it, either, the Microsoft Copilot enablement or the application gateway that allows them to use whatever tool they're using. And then, but protect from, automated DLP attached to some form of internal data for a central known point of truth, but then also auditing everything that's going into this stuff. So a lot of the stuff's included with a lot of these platforms, which is cool. At least like the market is ready for this type of stuff. It's just education and enabling people to actually do it.
Yeah. As long as, these stakeholders are taking care of the education aspect of it. For this question, you can think big, Jason. If you had to predict, where do you see AI taking cybersecurity in the next 5 years?
I think it's going to continue being the threat actors are going to figure out how they can leverage AI to do something new and, try to breach networks in a specific way or breach people, however they can do it. They're usually the most innovative. And then we figure out a way to leverage AI to defend against it. So I think it's just going to be the never ending battle on, who's going to be the leg up, developing something that's offensive and then how to defend against it. I think, unfortunately, we're going to see the continued iteration and revolving door of that. But I think we're also going to see an improvement leveraging AI on detection tools, trying to be proactive more with certain things, especially like phishing and all that stuff that's inherently going to be improved by AI. I think we're going to see an improvement there as well. I think we're going to see it further along the lines of the autonomous, the autonomous SOC, having all those playbooks and all that, SecOps or whatever they want to call it, the SOAR. A lot of people are saying SOAR is dead. It's just evolved into SecOps, but SOAR is still a piece of it. So we're going to see a lot of that evolve as the capabilities get more inherent, to where the automation is going to go farther and farther and more capabilities it's going to have on reacting to the anomalies that come in. But I still don't see a way for us yet to remove the human in the loop until we have at least some form of AGI or ASI. Something like that, to where it's some general super intelligent AI that could surpass anything a human can do from a reasoning perspective. I think we're still going to have there. So long answer of, I think we're just going to see a step ladder on each side as one tries to battle the other.
Interesting. So, Jason, for IT leaders who are working to strengthen their cybersecurity strategy, what's one hard-learned lesson from your experience that you'd share as a key advice?
Yeah, the biggest one I can say is never get comfortable that you're completely mitigated and prevented all risks. And also don't look into point solutions, to where I've seen many customers, all sizes and shapes, come in. They're like, hey, we have enough budget to go out and get this one specific solution for this thing, whether it's we're going to go get EDR, we're going to go get email security, we're going to go do whatever it is. Make sure there's a framework in place to where how everything's going to work together, and don't bring in so many different point solutions that your team is now making it unmanageable. To where you have so many different platforms you need to go into, so many different alerts from different tool sets that you need to figure out where the actual breach occurs. SIM tooling is only so effective. It's just another tool in its path. So don't get so used to having point solutions that fit specific use cases. Find an overall methodology and strategic approach to this. And then also never get comfortable. One thing I'd throw out is, one thing I'm seeing a lot more is the whole EDR killer mindset. And the different toolings that come in that surpass that EDR tool that's on the endpoint. They know how to recognize for CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Defender, Signet, all those different toolings, and they know how to bypass it and escalate into either the kernel or the drivers, stuff like that, to where they can bypass any software that's sitting on top of it. So there's more sophistication that's getting into these threats, to where never get comfortable, because something's always evolving, and that's where I was going in, the AI evolving here and here. The threats are always evolving, so we need to as well.
Yeah, well, great answer. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your insights and this incredible conversation that we've had. You are very articulate and very well versed with all the expertise that you have had over years. So I really hope that our listeners and viewers would be greatly benefited from this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.